today and how it might be able to help out your own workflows. So who are we? We're at Lenses.io. We develop the ideal developer experience for your multi-Kafka, multi-cloud world, with all of the bells and whistles needed for data observability, self-service administration, processing and understanding data, with all the good RBAC security features and governance applied as well. So helping large enterprises become more and more event-driven. Today, we'll be talking about SQL Studio, which is a specific feature within our platform for querying Kafka data as it is within a topic using a very familiar SQL syntax. It's one of the other features, one of many ways to explore data within Kafka, and I'll give you a brief demonstration on a few of those in a second. But with SQL Studio, it's really great for, in my mind, three separate things. Is one, when we're troubleshooting, trying to find that needle in a haystack can be quite difficult when we're working with Kafka with separate partitions, an event log there. If you're not super familiar, it can be quite the arduous journey. And without sufficient tooling, you end up having to deploy like a CLI consumer or grepping your way through actual Kafka topic files. So SQL Studio is our way within the Lenses platform of asking questions about your data as it is within that Kafka topic. So a Kafka topic is always being a consistent event log that is always being produced too. We provide the ability to ask questions about that data as it's stored within Kafka and as it is receiving messages live in real time. Uses and Lenses, I'll go over in a second how it works in the UI. I'll be operating from sort of the administrator perspective, but everything still applies for a more granular role. All of those RBAC controls still apply, so I'd only be able to query data that is specific to my permissions. It's available within the user interface, but you can also run these queries via the Lenses CLI or API as well. So if you've got some sort of application flow where you need to have specific information within for that time frame or at that moment of Kafka data, you can use all of these queries programmatically. Something that's important to keep in mind, since we're talking about SQL, a lot of people will see the interface and associate that with sort of a relational database management system mindset of, oh, this is an analytical tool. I can use this to ask questions historically and really run analytical use cases. And that's really not how it's designed or intended to be used due to the limitations of Kafka itself. So when we run a SQL Studio query, what we're doing is we're actually consuming topic data directly from Kafka. So Lenses itself is acting as a Kafka consumer. We're pulling that data into the browser, presented to you through Lenses, doing any sort of filtering or transformations that you specify in your query, and then just presenting that in the browser. So there's no intermediary storage, and it alleviates the need from deploying a connector, syncing your data, and replicating it elsewhere to something like an Elastic, just so you can ask questions about the data as it is within Kafka. We alleviate that need and that dependency so that you have the ability to use SQL to ask questions about your data as it is at that live moment. Something to keep in mind is that and we'll go deeper in this in a little bit, the best practices is to filter based on Kafka metadata, since that has a natural index. So that would be partition, offset, and timestamp. To do that, if you don't do that, then we end up doing a full topic scan just to return that result. And I'll show you again how this works in practice, which isn't always an issue, but just keep in mind, these Kafka topics can get quite big pretty regularly. And if you try to consume the entire thing, then you'll just run into issues. So we'll show you how it works in practice. And it says here at the bottom, the more joins and aggregations, the more amount of processing you require for that specific query can potentially be the bottleneck, but it's usually network in I/O from Kafka itself that is going to be your bottleneck for consuming that data from Kafka, which we're all familiar with if we've ever deployed a Kafka consumer. So you got three core use cases that we'll be reviewing today. One is troubleshooting, so finding that needle in the haystack. There was a problem, and now it's time to examine that Kafka message and understand specifically where it went wrong and help to understand why to address that problem in the future. It can also be used for data exploration and understanding trends about your data within Kafka. And then since we also have this similar syntax for our SQL processors, which are used as applications to transform a flow and do stream processing. You can test those transformations in SQL Studio, verify that everything looks correct in the output, and then actually deploy that application to affect that flow of data. Awesome. So we'll jump right in. So when we're troubleshooting, we're trying to understand, something went wrong within Kafka. Maybe a consumer failed. Maybe we're seeing bad data at the source system that we're syncing to. But it's now our job to understand what went wrong and why. And that is a great use case for SQL Studio. So to reiterate that there are a few ways to understand data within Kafka when you're using lenses. I'm here at our topology stage. And I can quickly jump to the topic I'll be working with and understand the general flow of data into this topic and where it's going. So I can see I've got my microservice here that's producing data to my topic, a few SQL processors running, and I'm also backing this topic data up to S3. Now, scenario being, I'm a developer responsible for this application, and I've received a ticket that there is something wrong with my topic data here. Maybe there was a single bad message, and a consumer is failing. So these consuming applications are hung up on this corrupted or bad message, or it's a data quality problem, or maybe I just knew that there was an issue with the producer and I need to verify that nothing is actually wrong with the data. I can quickly jump to my topic here. And before we even start using SQL Studio, we make it very easy to jump to a specific offset within a partition. You can do that here. I can go to the earliest as well. And that data is all right here. For our less technical users that might not be as fluent with partition and offset understanding, we also provide the ability to jump to a specific timestamp. So dependent on the topic's retention, you can jump to a specific period of time and understand what that data looked like here. I can easily double click into a specific message, see the values, apply some data masking to that sensitive information, or I can view my information as a table. But let's say that that isn't enough for me right now, and I need to be using SQL to ask questions about my topic data. And SQL Studio would be the tool to use, again, alleviating that need from syncing to an external source and using SQL to ask questions about my data here. You can just ask questions immediately about my data as it is within a Kafka topic. So my scenario being, I know I have a bad message somewhere within my topic, and something went wrong at a specific offset. So I will just use the meta flag to represent that I'm accessing a message metadata field. And I will go ahead and ask lenses to show me that specific message. So it's going to be important to include that where for that specific offset, as well as the specific partition that I'm looking for. And autocorrect is always really nice because it saves me from typing more than I really need to. And this appears to be an older offset than my retention period allowed. That's me trying to save time and get these queries built ahead of time. No worries. Just to give you an example of how it works. Here's an example of why it's important to select partition, because if you just select offset, then you'll get each offset for that partition, for every partition. So I'll be sure to specify exactly which partition I want to use to return that specific message. And there we go. Easily viewed as a table, very understandable. And then I can always download the results of my SQL Studio query as well. So if this was a problem message, I need to inform another team. I can either screenshot this or just download that message data or messages data in my desired format and share that with my team. So I've notified there's an issue. I've found that specific message. But what if I don't know specific offset? I just know generally what offset range something occurred in. Or there was a problem with a producing application, was online, but producing bad data for a while. And I need to verify exactly which messages I can add to a dead letter queue or address some other way, and which messages are actually good. And I can use those to resolve my state. Very easy. Just instead of using equals, I will add a few specific filters. See here that I'm now slicing the Kafka topic by metadata. And again, easily viewed as a table, and then I can drill down into specific messages here. And I can download that, share that with my team, and have them verify exactly where that issue happened. Awesome. And again, if I'm not super fluent in Kafka, or maybe I don't know what the offset range might be an issue, but I do know what time an application started seeing problems. It's very easy to query based on timestamp as well. I'll just show you how that works here. And if it isn't clear by now, it's just me presenting today. So if you have any stories about nightmares of having to troubleshoot and find a specific message in a Kafka log, I've heard some entertaining stories from customers before, and why SQL Studio is such a value add to them. So feel free to raise a hand and chime in. So this query here, I am saying, show me where the timestamp is now minus 5 minutes. So I'm querying within the last 5 minutes, all of the data in my Kafka topic. And I can see easily right here. Catching up to see if there's any questions. Awesome. Apollo.
I think Anand has raised his hand for a question.
So somebody help him speak.
Should be all right now.
Yeah, okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I can.
Okay. I had a few challenges in the SQL core in the past few days, and of course, I was able to resolve it, but I need to have some more insight into this because to get to this point, I had to spend some couple of days to. So my first question is, we had the Kafka topic where we had array of values. It's not something like a single object, but in the data side, we had an array. So every a message or every event had multiple rows or records, what you call. So I have to use this string to get the underscore value and to get to a point to where if I was able to get the data. But to get to this, I mean, is there any better documentation where all your metadata values like what you had used, underscore meta and underscore value could be easily accessible? And how do I get to this? So that's what my first question is.
Yeah, so accessing data in SQL Studio that is part of an array.
Yeah.
Perfect. So
You have any specific examples that have been, yeah, exactly. So
yeah,
that's what right. How do you get to do that?
great question. Yep. So quick example here. Let me specify. So we've got our Kafka message here. It's got an array called Polygon, and then each of
Yes,
the
sir.
numbers has longitude and latitude. So if I want a specific value from that array, syntax should be this. Is that the right data? No, it's grid. That's my problem. I'm querying the wrong topic. So here, I'm not applying a limit. So I'm saying every single message, show me that first 0 array, that longitude value, and I'm getting that here. And since it's a large topic, that query is going to keep running. And a good example of showing when to use the limit section. But does that answer your question, Anand, of how to access that data in SQL Studio? It's a nested.
Yeah. I mean, you are right on that, but we can put a limit and see that we can. So that would help us to really cut down our query time, I suppose. Anyway.
Yeah, that's a great segue into limiting the queries. So the SQL Studio feature has built-in sort of rate limiting. And there's a few ways that you can configure that. So I jump
Okay.
into SQL Studio. I can view execution details here. And you'll see that the default limits are for when the SQL Studio query returns 200 megabytes or if it
Okay.
runs for an hour. Now you can set
Okay.
that here in your query, and you can also change that default. And I'm not sure what the exact syntax here is actually, but you can set that, I believe it's max memory. It's something similar like that. And then you can set your 100 megabytes there, and that would be your new limit here. You can also view all running queries. I believe it's show queries. And this will show you all queries that are running for your Lenses instance right now. Once you get that ID, if there's one that's running a long time and using up a lot of resources, you can also say, I believe it's stop or kill. Maybe it's kill. Awfully violent. That ID there should be kill query if that's running too long. The other thing you can do is, since we're acting as a Kafka consumer, you can actually add a quota to that consumer group ID that Lenses use. I think it's lenses.sql.studio or .consumer. And you can set that within Lenses to say, hey, rate limit this consumer to only consume this amount of data. So it's configurable at the query level, at the default configuration for Lenses, but then you can also rate limit Lenses SQL Studio by setting that quota.
That sounds good. Thank you. And another question from one of our customer is, when we have those values, what is Mary showed earlier regarding for the polygon, is there any way where you could use the delete statement in the SQL Studio to delete for the particular ID?
So delete is an interesting, you can definitely insert data very easily using SQL
Okay.
Studio. Delete's an interesting situation because the Kafka protocol limits sort of what you can do, because intentionally Kafka is supposed to be the immutable event log.
Exactly. That's
We,
correct.
I don't believe you can delete from SQL Studio, but we do provide the ability to delete within the topic page if you have the correct permissions. So if I
Okay.
jump to a specific topic, I can delete messages. The limitation here, and that's a Kafka limitation, is you have to start from the earliest offset, and then you can go to an offset. You can't
Okay.
specify a middle slice or start at the most recent and go to an earlier offset.
Gotcha. Understood.
Yeah.
Okay.
And actually, this, because all these operations that you do manually, through the UI, they're actually backed up by our SQL Studio in practice. So what you can achieve here, you can do with a delete on the SQL Studio. And I'm going to send you the documentation as well. But as Adam said, it's a bit tricky doing deletion in topics. So
Okay.
the web page I shared with you talks about the details, because you can do what Adam did, and for a special occasion where the topics are compacted, you can actually even initiate a delete for a key that actually what it does, it sends for that key, it sends a null, an empty message, which is kind of like a tombstone. But
Okay.
you'll find all the details in the web page I sent just now.
Okay. Thanks, Adam. That's great. I mean, will have to look at it in detail, but that's good pointer, and I'll work on it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no worries.
Great questions. Thank you. And yeah, the next time there's a question that you've got that's taking up a couple days, feel free to chime into our community Slack. You can tag me directly. Happy to help you out there.
Sure. So thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate your help here.
Absolutely. All right, so keeping track with the troubleshooting queries, so we showed within the last 5 minutes. You can also use other time frames. So yesterday, again, keeping in mind that for large, high throughput topics, this is going to be a lot of data. And where you can, it's best to attempt to filter your query based on Kafka metadata. Again, since that is natively indexed, we do have some plans to enhance this feature. We're still evaluating what the best way to do that would be, whether that's specifying your own index and maybe speeding up filters based on that specific message value field, possibly marking a topic as, analytical, and maybe we cache some data there. But if you have, ideas or requests for how we could enhance this, more than happy to listen. And Adamos would be our guy there, being head of product at Lenses. Awesome. So we've covered troubleshooting. Something went wrong, but we need to find out what and why, how to filter based on offset, timestamp, and then message data as well would be a good one. So let's say we want to return just the total amount, just the vendor ID, and just the trip distance from my New York taxi trip topic. And then I'm actually going to filter based on some business logic too. So let's say if the total amount was less than zero, I'm troubleshooting, that would tell me that there's an issue because somebody is getting a free and actually paid to take a taxi ride. And that's all within yesterday. And I can confirm that indeed there are some taxi drives that they were paid to take negative amounts. Sounds good to me, but probably not for my business. So again, easily to download those message returns and notify the team that, hey, there's an issue here. I've filtered based on actual Kafka information, but then also business logic to find this issue. The next use case other than troubleshooting that we see SQL Studio being used for would be exploration. So asking questions about your data and understanding trends that we're seeing in Kafka in real time. So keeping with the New York taxi trip data, maybe I want to understand, an aggregation. So a taxi shift might last 8 hours, and I want to identify metrics specific to each vendor that happened within the last 8 hours. This could also be used to test a transformation. If I wanted to do a windowed aggregation to say, hey, a tumbling window every 8 hours, build me a compacted topic with the sums of each fare, total, tips, and tolls. So I've got an example here that I will copy in. And so I'm taking the vendor ID and I'm getting the sum of each of the fare amounts, totals, tips, and tolls for each of those vendors. And I will specify within the last 8 hours to fit my taxi driver shift. And then I'm just going to group by the vendor ID. And autocomplete is always nice. I can see that being returned here. I've got two vendor IDs, and it was a busy shift. I'm getting sums in the not quite millions. Oh, yep, totals in the millions. So very busy taxi business that we have. But then again, doing a full topic scan here, except for my time filters within the last 8 hours, and then grouping by vendor ID. If I stop the query too, easy to download this information and share with my team. Or again, deploy this as a SQL processor, create a compacted topic, and then sync that to S3 too. Super easy to do in Lenses. Some other questions I could be asking about my data is maybe I need to calculate driver pay for an 8-hour period. So I'll keep my vendor ID, but then maybe driver pay is actually a sum of the tip amount minus the tolls. Maybe I'm charging my taxi drivers for the tolls they encounter. I hope not, as we just realized, we've got millions of revenue in the last 8 hours. And I've got a typo. So the air handling is really nice. That looks good. I'll go ahead and run this query. You can see here, the query is going to keep running. It's going to consume messages and then apply my filter and grouping. And you'll see this data being updated as we are consuming those messages within the last 8 hours. Awesome. So really easily to ask questions about my data, understand trends as they are in Kafka right now, all without syncing to an external source, worrying about configuring a connector, worrying about that connection and that transfer of data, the IO there, but then also replication of maybe a giant topic and storing that in an external source, and then finally asking my questions. I can just ask questions as it is in Kafka right now. Sounds like we had a hand raised.
Yeah, I have one question. Aman. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Sorry, I mean, probably it's almost time to close, but I have another requirement. Is it something I have two Kafka clusters where I need to copy a topic from one class dev cluster to prod cluster? So, is there any easy way via lenses I could do that, or if you could just point me to some tool or some website, probably some. Instructions, that would be great help here, please.
Sure. Are you copying the topic configuration or the data or both?
Just data, topic data from one. That is one of our requirement because we already tested in dev. We want to do the same with the similar data on the prod as well.
Gotcha. Yeah, the easiest way to do that with lenses right now is to
Mhm.
back up that topic to an S3 bucket and then restore
Okay.
that topic from the S3 bucket into your secondary cluster. We do have a Kafka to Kafka replicator in the works. It's not available yet, but we do have customers replicating data via that S3 integration. Since when you back it up to S3, it retains it has exactly one semantics and retains your exact ordering in Kafka. You can be sure that that data is going to be like for like in both environments.
Okay. Do you have any working example already there where we move the data to S3 and bring it back to?
We have done one of these sessions on the S3 backup and restore. So I would check out that video and then
Okay.
contact us if you have any questions.
Sure, sure. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Thanks. That's all from my end. It's a great session today.
No worries. Glad we could be of help.
Yeah.
So we already talked a little bit about exploring data, aggregations, understanding trends. You can also test transformations. Definitely contact me if you want to see some examples there. And if you want to find out for yourself, just go to lenses.io/start, download our box instance, and start producing data, asking questions in SQL syntax. Also, be sure to join our Slack community. You can interface with me and Adamos, the wider team there, and ask us any questions at all about Apache Kafka and lenses. And with that, that has been our 30 minutes. Thank you all so much for joining. Been a pleasure, and I'll see you next week from London at Kafka Summit.